The Philadelphia 76ers training camp is officially in full swing, and Tyrese Maxey is one of the rising stars on this roster. I want to break down what is being said about the rising star on this team and why I think he may be poised for an even bigger leap than people are making out to be. We got some comments that I want to break down specifically from Kelly Oubre, as well as some thoughts from Tyrese Maxey himself, some areas that it does seem like he's prioritizing improving on, and everything else that has to do with the leap that is about to go down this year. I think there's a real chance that when we zoom out at the end of the season, and we're talking about Tyrese Maxey as a surefire top 15 to top 20 NBA player, and I think that changes the outlook for the Sixers team drastically in both the short and long term. That this is not Paul George walking to be Joel Embiid's co-star. No, this is Paul George walking to be a part of a trio with Tyrese Maxey and with Joel Embiid. And everybody seems to be on the exact same page with that exactly. Now, for Tyrese Maxey specifically, there's a lot of different layers that I want to get into. From the basketball perspective, it's tough to point out an area where specifically he needs to get better. He's improved leaps and bounds beyond what anyone could have expected to this point. I mean, to highlight just what he's going off last year and his growth, and whoa, get Tobias Harris off my screen here. But to talk about Tyrese Maxey here, we're talking about coming off a 25.9 point per game, 6.2 assist season, 3.7 rebounds per game last year. A little bit of a regression as a shooter, as he was just 37.3% from three and 45% from the field. But ultimately, he improved a ton in just about every area there. And sorry about a little bit of the nonsense on the keyboard here. But there is a video that I did want to pull up. Had to keep it off the audio for some copyright stuff. But look at Kelly Oubre's thoughts on Tyrese Maxey. I'm going to talk us through it here. So he said he's himself, when talking about Tyrese Maxey, continues on to say that like he's more assertive. I would say he was vocal last year. He's just more assertive. And you can see Maxey kind of taking on the leadership position. Kelly continues saying he's coming on his own. He made a name for himself last year in the league, which he was trying to do that last year, and he did that. So he's just more assertive, man, more confident. Once again, seeing him lead this team. And definitely a better leader than, and definitely than he was last year. So very cool to have Kelly a part of this. Very cool for Tyrese Maxey to be filling in these shoes. And also shout out to the Sixers social team that has been absolutely crushing it from the videos in the Bahamas here. Really cool to get this kind of access to the team, some of the opinions there. And Maxey is not just talking the talk, but walking the walk on the things that we're seeing for how he's going about his business down there. And a couple others that I would want to pull out. Tyrese Maxey, as part of his goal to be a more intentional leader, says he took rookies Jared McCain and Dembona out for dinner last night following the Sixers' first official practice of the season. Putting that new contract to good use. I think this is a really cool move from a guy who also mentioned Tyrese kind of putting a squash on being called the vet from Jared McCain there, which is very funny that at this young age, still 24 years old or 23 years old, I believe Maxey still is at this point, that he is a guy that has well seasoned beyond his years at this point. There's been a ton thrown at this kid right away, and he's handled it in stride. Now, a couple other quotes that I did want to break out from Tyrese Maxey. He says he spent his summer trying to improve as a playmaker, saying, quote, honestly, the biggest thing for me was just making reads when I get into the paint. In the league, the shot quality right now, you got to be able to shoot threes and make threes, and I think we'll be able to do that. Maxey says he spent the summer working out with family and friends. Quote, I have some athletic friends, but not athletic like KJ Martin and Andre Drummond athletic, so I didn't get to work on lobs. He also talked about Paul George specifically, was asked about the signing, and he said what he's learned about Paul George so far. For starters, he's a great shooter. He also continued on to say he lets the game come to him. He never forces anything. We can go to him in the clutch. We know that. Quote, for a superstar, all-star guy, he's a plug-and-play guy. That's a good compliment for somebody who likes the ball in his hands. If you can ever just plug and play anywhere in any type of situation, that's a good compliment. I think this is really well said by Tyrese Maxey, and something that I've been particularly optimistic about Paul George's fit on the Sixers team. This is not a James Harden situation where he plays a very unique and specific style of basketball. Paul George is about as universal of a player as you can get, that you truly can take him and put him on any of the 30 rosters in the NBA, and he will be effective, that he can play in just about any system. There is a role for Paul George. And for the Sixers team, the need is very clear and very specific. I mean, I know I scared everybody having this pulled up on the screen earlier, but when you compare it to a guy like Tobias Harris, it is night and day on what the impact has made. And I don't mean just the numbers, which you can see, and to directly compare, we're talking about going from 17.2 points per game as a 35.3% three-point shooter to 22.6 points per game on a 41.3% three-point shooter. While that is notable there and a key part of it, much more of this is about the stylistic nature of their game. That with Tobias Harris, felt like everything was a little difficult. It was dribbling and backing into tough contested twos, with Paul George, there is this smoothness to his game, the step backs, the catch and shoot ability, the willingness as a shooter. We're talking about this guy attempting 8 3-pointers a game last season versus we were begging Tobias Harris to just give us 4, man. Can you toss up 4 corner threes over the course of the matchup? And typically the answer to that was no. I mean, we're talking about this guy in a series clinching loss had 0 points for the Sixers team the last time that he was on the floor. But ultimately, don't want to get too lost in the Tobias Harris slander here. Another quotes that I did want to highlight was from the man himself, Paul George, who said, quote, "This is the first time I played with an elite point guard and an elite big man all at once." So I love that he's saying this, and I do think it's true. That I think there are some people who wanted to squint between the lines and take offense to this, but no offense to the Steven Adams or Avika Zubaks of the world, but they don't quite stack up against what Joel Embiid can bring to the table, and I do think that's what Paul George's point was there. And to put it particularly here, we're talking about from Paul George specifically, or from our guy Joel Embiid specifically, all over the place on the keys tonight. But Embiid coming off a season in which he averaged 34.7 points per game, 11 rebounds, and 5.6 assists. It's also another takeaway that the Sixers are clearly being extremely calculated in their usage of Joel Embiid in training camp. That this ramp-up process or this load management, injury concerns, they're approaching it from day one. That Joel already not participating in some scrimmages. I don't love that from the overall standpoint, just thinking like, man, you had offseason. You should come in a little bit ready to go. But I also will trust the process a little here and give my hat tip to the doctors that if they believe this is the plan in place, we got to live with that. That's been my frustration years past, that it does feel like Joel calls a little bit too much of the shots or has too much say in whether or not he's being on the floor, that if there is this concrete, mapped out game plan for this is the best route to make sure he's healthy for the playoffs, we got to trust it. So I'm not going to press into it too much beyond that. He's still active at practice. He's still obviously a former MVP, and we know what a talent he is. But it's going to take some time for this team to fully gel together. So I'm very excited about everything that is coming out of training camp so far. I do think Tyrese Maxey, I won't say is taking the keys to this organization, but he's certainly stepping right there in the passenger seat and, putting his hands on the wheel if things do dictate that to occur. So we will see how things shape out over the course of the season, but I think people are still underselling what a leap he can make. That we're talking about a guy who's gotten better year in and year out in his 4th season in the NBA. We're talking about massive leaps just last season, becoming a first-time All-Star, winning Most Improved after coming in, I believe, 6th in voting just 2 seasons earlier in the Most Improved category. This is a guy who is going to work for it, is ready for it, and will not stop until he gets to exactly where he wants to be. So could not be prouder to have him as the face of the Sixers franchise moving forward, and very excited in the short term for what he can bring to this team. I think the 2-man actions between Embiid and Maxey, that was just the foundation last year. I think those two are going to continue expanding off it, and really what I'm looking at, it's between the ears up here, that I want Tyrese Maxey to make sure he's looking at the Paul George and Joel Embiids of the world as absolute equals. This is not the little brother situation. You are every bit as important to this team as those guys, and it does sound like that's exactly what's going down at training camp. And I did pull up the quote from Kelly Oubre here. To give Oubre a little love, we did get this quote here that I did want to shout out from Nick Nurse here, who was asked about Oubre, and he said exactly, quote here, that talking about Oubre here, saying that Kelly Oubre seems to have a, quote, whole new level of comfort from Nick Nurse here. Like he went from year 2 to year 10. We know who he is, he knows who we are, and he knows what we're doing. Nurse says that Oubre came back stronger, in shape, and focused. And to add to that a little further, we know what Kelly brings as far as the on-court standpoint, 15.4 points per game, 5 rebounds last year. He is the guy that is expected to step in as that starting shooting guard for this Sixers team. I'm intrigued from the defensive side of the ball for what he brings. He called himself the Plumbers, the trio of Paul George, Caleb Martin, and himself as the defensive stoppers for this team. So we'll see how everything shakes out, but shout out to Kelly and happy to have him back. Continuity has been a big word that Joel Embiid has harped on, and there is at least a familiar face in him returning, a guy that I am hopeful can kind of fully find his lane on the Sixers team. I see Nurse alluding to it there, and I do hope that is the case. When it is decisive, quick-minded basketball, Kelly Oubre is incredibly effective. I think there were times where he punched a bit above his weight class as far as what was on his plate last year, but ultimately, when he kept things simple, kept things minimized, I was thrilled with the version of Kelly Oubre they got here, and he earned his money as a result. So things are trending up for this Sixers team across the board, and Tyrese Maxey very much at the forefront of that. So let me know if you guys are as excited as I am for this season and for that Maxey leap. And in the comments, I want to hear from you guys is what is your stat line prediction for Tyrese Maxey this year? Give me the points, assists, and 3-point percentage. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Also, if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like on this video, and I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.